and and so I'm calling. I'm in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. MJ.
Fantastic. I am zooming in from Middletown, Connecticut. Catherine, where are you?
I'm in Manhattan. And if you look out my window, you could see about a tablespoon of the Hudson River.
Paul, where are you calling from?
Well, I'm calling from what most people think of as Phoenix, but as you know, it's divided into lots of little segments, and the bit that I'm in is Paradise Valley.
Lovely, lovely. Well, why don't we get started here? This is Sacred Space, Religion and Cosmic Exploration, and it's a project of Arizona State University's Interplanetary Initiative. I'm Lance Gharavi, Professor of Theater at ASU and Associate Director of the Interplanetary Initiative.
And I am MJ Rubenstein, Professor of Religion and Science and Society at Wesleyan University and co-PI of the II's Sacred Space program.
This is our fourth and final session in this series of public conversations about the intersections of religion and space exploration. We're really grateful that you joined us today. All of these conversations are recorded, and you'll be able to find a link to those recordings on our project's website, and I can drop that in the chat. Let's see. There we go. And so throughout this series, we've been delving into the past, the present, and the future of the relationships between religion and space exploration. And today, we are looking ahead, really, really far ahead, by asking, what is the cosmic future of humanity? So the past few years have seen a really amazing acceleration in humanity's efforts to venture out into space. Big news just this week: the 4 astronauts who will go on the Artemis 2 mission have been announced. Artemis 2 is a mission that will circle the moon in 2024. So, but all of these efforts, all of these launches, all of these missions, where are these efforts leading us? To what end? Is there a guiding purpose in all of this? Do humans have a role to play in the life of the universe? Both science and religion have various visions of the distant future and of purpose. So how do they differ? How do they intersect? To help us explore these and other questions, we've invited a marvelous and exciting pair of speakers. And MJ's going to tell you all about it.
Exactly. I'm going to tell you about this marvelous and exciting pair of speakers. First, Catherine Keller is a feminist, eco-poetic theologian who teaches at Drew University, where she serves as George T. Cobb Professor of Constructive Theology. She is the author of a slew of edited volumes and numerous monographs, including most recently Facing Apocalypse, Climate, Democracy, and Other Last Chances. Paul Davis is a theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and astrobiologist at Arizona State University, where he serves as Regents Professor and Director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science. He's also winner of the 1995 Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion. He has written a staggering number of books, including most recently, What's Eating the Universe? You can find out more about our speakers on our website, the part of our website that I am now putting into the chat right there. They've got longer biographies there. And of course, you can Google them until you are blue in the face and you will not read the end of what is on the interwebs about them. Okay, the chat. Thank you so much for telling us where you are from. Oh my goodness, Oregon and Texas and California and Arizona and Louisiana, and all sorts of wonderful places. Really, welcome, welcome. It's wonderful to see you. As you, what did you say, Lance?
New Haven.
Yes, New Haven. Yes, good, fantastic, New Haven. Speaking of the chat, please do feel free to use this chat to engage in dialogue with one another as you're listening. If you've got sources that you think of that might be helpful to share, please throw them there. Little thoughts that you'd like to offer up, this is totally fine. We will be monitoring the chat for kindness, common decency, good humanness, but we won't be taking questions from the chat. If you have a question that you'd like to ask our panelists, please look down at the bottom of your screen now. You'll see a Q&A button. Submit the question right there through the Q&A button. You can submit it at any time while anybody is speaking, and we will turn to it toward the end of our evening together. So a word about our evening together. This is how it's going to go. Lance and I will be talking with our panelists until about 7:50 Eastern Standard Time, at which point we will turn to the questions that you have submitted through the Q&A, and we'll talk for about, we'll talk with our panelists with those questions for about 20 minutes. And then we'll be sure to wrap things up at 8:15 Eastern Standard Time, which is 5:15 Pacific Time, and send you on your way to enjoy the rest of your weeks and your weekends. All right, Lance, let's do it. This is our last one. Let's go.
Let's
Let's
do
make
this.
this one so good. All right.
All right. Save the best for last. Okay, so the question we're asking in this session is, what is the cosmic future of humanity? But I want to pause for a minute on that last word. We hear a lot, and I just saw a poster today for the Artemis 2 mission, and it said for all humanity or all humankind. Who is the referent there? Who or what is the referent there? What are we referring to when we talk about the cosmic future of humanity or for all humankind? I'll start with Catherine.
Yeah, thanks for that little question. So, yeah, how do we define that term humanity? Well, first of all, humanity seems to be the species which constantly wants to define itself. I mean, we seem to be that species that wants to know what we are, and that is a really bottomless impulse, it seems, in this species, and we're taking part in it right now. And I'm glad, because even though we are the species who wants to know what it means that we are human, we don't seem to have figured it out together terribly well. So we keep working at it. So what's humanity? Well, since I was introduced as a feminist eco-theologian, I should say it's great that at least in this millennium, you just naturally say, what is humanity and not what is mankind? I just want to give humanity credit for that, for having, yes, now really translated mankind fully into humanity. And so what is that humanity that is our species? I love the question, and I understand that loving the question is a deep symptom of being a human. But what really comes to me is a quote from Desmond Tutu from the heart of the struggle against apartheid in South Africa in the last century, but it's always stayed with me. And he says, "My humanity is bound up in your humanity. We can only be human together." So that's saying something, isn't it? That humanity is an inherently relational term, that my humanity is inseparable from yours. We might even begin to sense that we share some sort of sacred space together in our humanity, in its interdependence. But when we say we can only be human together, maybe at this point, we are beginning to get really clear on the fact that together isn't just together with other humans, but maybe with the rest of the species on this planet. And I'm going to be rather this planet focused, I have to say, because that's the only way I can inhabit a cosmic perspective. So a relationality perhaps at every level of being human together with the non-human is defining the character of our species, but a relationality that's always in question, which is why we're always asking what we are. So always this humanity is in question and in relation. But I have to say, when I am asked what is humanity right now, given the context of this sacred space, I am reminded of a passage in a certain Astrotopia by a certain Mary Jane Rubenstein, where she almost defines humanity, saying that humans, after all, are barely humans at all. We're 90% bacteria. I love that. Barely humans at all. We're 90% bacteria. We're animals made of vegetables and minerals and sunlight and star stuff. And then she goes on to say, we're not just on Earth, we are of it, along with everything we think of ourselves as ruling. That dangerous dominion from Genesis 1, etc. But that we're not just on Earth, we are of Earth. This is crucial. This is crucial to me as a theologian who goes back to Genesis 1. In fact, I think I wrote a book on just one verse of Genesis 1. But yeah, where the human is Adama, and the term Adam comes from it, and it means earthling. So yeah, that Adama is the earthbound one, the earthling. So that's, I think, where I wanted to get started. It's just that being human is being entangled with everything non-human in our interdependence with each other as humans. And I guess because of the sacred space and the company that I am honored to find myself in, I want to say I bumped into a quote in a book of my own by a certain Paul Davis, who was saying that without observer, the atom is a ghost. And he was reflecting from the quantum level on everything's entanglement with its neighboring everything. And so that notion of entanglement runs from the microcosm out through the macrocosm, and somewhere in the mesocosm, we humans are trying to figure out who we are.
Wonderful. Paul, I would put the same question to you, but noting what Catherine said about the way we used to talk about space exploration for all mankind, and I also think back to Gil Scott-Heron's Whitey on the Moon, that this mankind or humankind has always implicitly excluded some, whether they're other people or as MJ suggests, bacteria and vegetables and other creatures. But I wonder if you could comment on this question of what's the referent there of humanity?
Well, 100 years ago, humanity was fairly well defined. It was us. And now we know that the edges of our species are very fuzzy, and that there were many other species of Homo, in some cases cohabiting with Homo sapiens on this planet, and that the notion of species is in any case not very well defined biologically. How many base pairs in your DNA would you have to change for us to no longer consider you as a human being? So I take a point of view when I hear the word universe or cosmos or anything like that. I think as a cosmologist, which is my main profession, and we think in terms of not just millions but billions of years, the vast lengths of time. Anything remotely like Homo sapiens has been on this planet at most a few million years. And if you really want to actually our sapiens species, we're talking about maybe a couple of 100,000 years. But if what we're envisaging a long-term future out there in space, we're going to spread out somehow and colonize other planets, build space stations, maybe spread out across the galaxy. We don't know if there's anybody else already there. So there's that whole issue. But supposing we're doing that, then the question is, if you're asking what is the destiny of humanity, then I think it doesn't lie with flesh and blood, doesn't lie with our species, doesn't lie with our particular DNA sequence. It's our culture that defines us. That's the thing that we want to keep alive. And often I get into discussions about, well, why go to Mars? Isn't this a waste of money, building a Mars base and so on? And one powerful argument is it could be like a lifeboat if some catastrophe were to befall Earth and wipe out our species on this planet, then the flame of human culture will be kept alive somewhere else in the universe. And it's really that I think I define humanity in terms of culture and what we can propagate out into the universe. And then that, of course, already begins to encompass things like artificial intelligence, that, these are designed intelligences, not evolved intelligences. And we would hope to bestow upon them human values. And this is very much a topical subject at the moment with self-driving cars and so on, that, you have to put in the famous trolley problem, the ethical dilemma. Does the car swerve to avoid a baby and kill 3 nuns or something? How do we come up with these values? So we're thinking all the time about how to embed human values in artificial intelligence. And to be honest, I think that biological intelligence is really just a transitory phase in the universe, and that what is going to be spreading out from our little corner of the universe is something which is really more of our cultural construct than the species as such. So it's a rather abstract definition of humanity.
Well, on that, I'll throw things right back to you, Paul, if that's okay, and ask. So assuming we don't annihilate ourselves in the process of heading toward these developments, what do you see might lie ahead for, well, either our species or our culture, or depending on how you want to define this, in the distant future? Say, what do you think the space exploration will look like 100 years from now, or maybe a few thousand years from now? Where are we ultimately going, and what would you say are the major stages on the way there?
Well, this futurology is great fun and also very difficult. I often tell people, well, when I was a child, I used to read these books that envisage life in the year 2000, and that what you would have huge buildings with monorails connecting them up at the 50th floor, and people traveling around with jetpacks, and space stations on the moon where you just fly there for a long weekend and get another tank of fuel and fly back again. And none of that has come to pass. What was completely missed was the whole revolution in computing and information science, information technology. And that is the thing that has transformed our society beyond recognition. And so even thinking about 100 years in the future, who knows what might come out of left field technologically that will transform our society. But, we can have a go at thinking in 100 years. Anything beyond 1,000 years, I think, is really outside our domain to be able to seriously envisage. 100 years, we can sort of extrapolate from now. And seeing as we're talking about space exploration, maybe space colonization, it's easy to extrapolate the present trends, but bearing in mind that when Neil Armstrong took that first small step, we all thought it was a first step on the stairway to the stars that would come very rapidly, and of course it didn't. And so now we've scaled back our ambitions to much more modest possibilities. People talking about a base on the moon. Ho hum, it's worth doing, but I can't get too excited about it. I've always been a fan of a base on Mars. I think within 100 years we could do that. But people would think, why bother? Well, I did give one reason why we might want to bother. The reason that most excites me is there's still a possibility for some sort of life on Mars, probably not on the surface, and we're talking microbial life only, probably in the deep subsurface. What we'd really like to know is whether, if there is life there, whether it's the same life as Earth, in which case, for my money, it will have got there from here, or vice versa, because Mars and Earth exchange rocks all the time, so it's traffic of material back and forth. Microbes can hitch a ride, so they're not quarantined from each other. But it's possible that life arose de novo on Mars, and that we will find its life, but not as we know it. And that would be the most exciting thing, because 2 out of 2 in one planetary system almost certainly means that the universe is teeming with life. But until we find a second sample of life, then we don't know. We might be completely alone in the universe. It could be the only planet here with life on it, and that I would find very depressing. So our place in the cosmos hinges on us finding that second sample of life. We won't find it on the moon. We might find it on Mars. And so that's where I would put my effort for space exploration and colonizing.
Catherine, can I
Thank
ask?
you.
Oh, yes. I was just,
No,
Catherine,
go ahead,
can
Madam Chair.
can I ask if you, so I won't ask you to make, projections about 100 years, 1,000 years, or things like that, because we've already made Paul do that. But do you have a sense of like what the end point to all this space exploration is, even like a conceptual end point? What are we working toward? Why are we doing this? Why are we out in space? What's the point? There seem to be a number of different motivations. Do any of them seem particularly compelling to you? Do any of them seem particularly not compelling to you?
Yeah,
Catherine, you're going to take that one?
I want to think toward that end point with you, that sense of purpose or telos or omega point that seems deep in the species imagination and has quite profound roots in the biblical heritage with its eschatologies, its apocalypses, its very mapped out sense of the new heavens, and Hashamayim, not meaning heavenly in the supernatural sense, but basically atmosphere and space. So that new heavens and earth, New Jerusalem. So of course there's a strong sense of movement towards ultimate purpose, and it's important that we get very conscious about what those purposes are in our space travel. But I think before I can quite go there to the telos, I need to sort of get back to our alpha point here on Earth, and this question of assuming that we don't annihilate ourselves, right? What lies before us? I mean, that was a question you'd shared in advance, and I found myself really preoccupied with that as I thought towards our conversation, because of course we don't know what's ahead of ourselves if we don't annihilate ourselves. But the thing is, we don't know that we're not going to annihilate ourselves. I'm not a pessimist who thinks that we are going to annihilate ourselves, though I have to say an increasing number of the really smart people I know are pessimists like that, thinking it's too late, or 99% is too late. I'm not there. I think we are, however, within a couple of decades of the possibility of being too late to avoid self-annihilation. I think that's a fairly moderate position, environmentally speaking. I think we have a significant chance, if a good chance not to annihilate ourselves, and probably not a nice, glamorous, big boom of an annihilation, but really the grotesque, tedious annihilation through the degradation of the environment which we depend on, and which is part of us. So I'm very concerned that we might annihilate ourselves rather soon, and millions of other species with us. And I raised that question not just as a way of bringing this discussion back down to earth. That's not what you want from this particular conversation. We want to shoot off truly into the outer limits. So I don't mean to just plant us down on earth, but to recognize that unless we get it right on earth, I don't know that we have any business even fantasizing escaping to outer space. I doubt that we will be able to either, unless we get it a whole lot more right. I think the escapes that might happen would be very unsatisfying, and I'm glad to talk about some various scenarios that I think are possible. But in the meantime, with ozone layer depletion, with global warming from fossil fuels, melting ice caps, rising sea levels, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, we are in big trouble. If we can rectify this trouble, and there are strong efforts to do so, there are signs that it's just possible that we will, barely, but possible. If we can heal significantly from this disease that we're living out right now, this combination of a certain form of late capitalism with good old international competition and top-down power dynamics, foiling democracy left and right. If we can get through the sickness that is allowing this kind of devastation of our oikos, our eco, our home planet, then I think it's beautiful to imagine space travel. If, however, space travel gets developed within these social ethical terms, these eco-social terms that are right now still, if not killing the living planet, certainly compromising its life and making the life of our species extremely uncertain. If we cannot do that healing work, then I'd be very, very sad to think of the spirit in which we would be going to outer space, just the spirit that we would be taking. I mean, I think it would be, the old 3 C's of competition, competition and capitalism, and what I suddenly want to call condescension towards every question from the bottom up. But yeah, what I think is that there are a variety of different scenarios. I could pause, or shall I just go ahead and name those? Yeah, I mean, in my little Facing Apocalypse book, I actually ended by naming 7 different apocalypse scenario. Apocalypse, by the way, apocalypsis does not mean the end of the world or doom. The Greek word means revelation. It means disclosure, not closure. And so it gets terribly misused as it's just meaning the end of the world. It's a revelation, it's a disclosure of great catastrophe, but in disclosing the catastrophe, there is the deep hope that radical transformation can happen by facing it. That's our hope, isn't it? By facing the catastrophic damage we're doing to the planet, we might actually bring about an adequate transformation, a transformation that might be big enough and fast enough to heal our self-destructive momentum. And then I think momentum to to Mars, et cetera, can really be very meaningful. But I just want to mention those 7 different scenaria. One of them I called ex-humanity. That's just, it's over. And that's a real possibility. No more humanity. The second I called brute remainders, which sort of going back to to Paleolithic conditions after complete destruction of civilization and great reduction, of course, of the population, but not mere cancellation of the species. The third I called New Jeru for the few, a kind of New Jerusalem that would be for the elite, those who could afford to build, good geodesic domes with climate protection and use the other survivors outside of the dome after all the catastrophes as slaves of one kind or another. That's a real possibility after great breakdown, that a few with resources gang up and make their life plausible and even comfortable together at the expense of all the other survivors. The fourth I called cybertopia. That's where space travel becomes key. And I think it's a very ambiguous option because it can be so motivated by escapism in the name of exploration and of survival that it can be a betrayal of the home planet and its oikos, its ecology. The fifth I called Village Earth, which wouldn't allow for space travel for a long time, but it would be people regathering in small clusters and tending, nourishing, healing the earth and human history. And then it would take probably at least 1,000 years before space travel would be possible again. The sixth I called Cosmocalypse. And that's really like the book of Revelation. That's where there's great catastrophe, but not the end of the world, but from great catastrophe, great transformation takes place, and could take place very quickly, and could take place quite globally because of some profound sense of having learned a lesson from the catastrophe, ecological plus whatever form of warfare and violence accompanies it. But the catastrophe itself could be the catalyst for a profound transformation. And of course, I hope it doesn't get to that. I hope it's the seventh option, which I named the Age of Enlivenment. Not another rationalist enlightenment, but an age of enlivenment that is able to bring about radical transformation without our having to go through complete catastrophe first. And in such an age of enlivenment, we might have the criteria needed for space travel to be responsible, for it not just being a way to conquer, to commodify, to colonize, but could be something very different. Okay, I paused there.
Thank you for that. So, Paul, moving from catastrophe to telos, talking about endpoints, talking about why all of this space exploration, where is it taking us in the long run? Does our species have a purpose? with respect to the life of the universe? Uh, and if so, how is space exploration part of that?
Well, again, I'm going to take a much longer term view. Then we come back to the problem I already mentioned. Are we alone in the universe? Is it ours for the taking, so to speak? Can we turn the universe into a better place? Or is it teeming with life and we're just one representative of that? And we don't know the answer to that, but our future on this planet and in the universe hinges obviously critically on that. If it's devoid of life, or certainly if it's devoid of other intelligent life, and it is, so to speak, available for us to spread out, then over immense periods of time, we could do that. If the emergence of life and mind on this planet is a bizarre fluke, unique in the universe, then we have an extraordinary responsibility not to snuff it out and to propagate it, and so that life and intelligence, mind, if you like, becomes a truly cosmic phenomenon. But of course, it might be so already. And then that would, I think, lead to a very different view of ourselves. I mentioned earlier on about one other sample of life, one microbe that is life, but not as we know it, would suffice to show we live in an intrinsically bio-friendly universe in which life pops up wherever it has the opportunity. And I, for one, if we can adopt this sort of religious or spiritual dimension to our discussion, find that much more congenial to think that life and mind, and I go beyond that, comprehension, the fact that there are beings like us who can make sense of the world, not just observe it, that is somehow built into the fundamental nature of the universe in a way that suggests that our future links to that of the universe. But when I use the word universe, one of the preoccupations of cosmologists is how is it going to end? And you might know the famous quote from Bertrand Russell in his book Why I'm Not a Christian, about the second law of thermodynamics and the vast death of the solar system, took the point of view that if the universe is doomed, then there's got to be a sort of hopelessness and pointlessness of human existence, even if the universe has got billions and billions of years ahead of it. I have to say, we don't know how the universe is going to end, and we don't even know whether what we've been calling the universe all along is just a small fragment of a vast, probably infinite system of universes, often called a multiverse, that itself may have no beginning or end. And so this is the eternal problem that humans have wrestled with in both science and theology. Was there an ultimate beginning of things, or has there always been something, and will there always be something? And how do humans fit into that, just as a representative of a fundamentally bio-friendly universe, or as a bizarre fluke in one corner of the universe? Either way, I think we have to have better stewardship of our home planet, because otherwise, as Catherine's pointed out, we may snuff ourselves out before we even get a chance to find out if we are alone. So I could go on and on about the end of the universe, but I won't, because I think we're nearing the end of our time, aren't we?
And to everybody, I recommend one of Paul's colleagues, Katie Mack, has an excellent book that came out a couple of years ago called The End of Everything. That's all about the end of the universe, as Paul has said. But I just want to follow up on one thing, Paul. You said if we turn out to be unique in the universe, of being the only life in the universe, or the only intelligent life, then we have a responsibility to carry on, as it were. And I wonder, where does that responsibility come from? Like, why do we have a responsibility if we're the only consciousness in the universe? Why do we have a responsibility to carry on? Where does that responsibility come from?
It comes from something we might call value, that we're surrounded by all sorts of objects and systems in the physical universe, And some of those things we don't care for very much, and others we give great value to. So great works of art, for example, or great works of literature we feel have some value. And if you take the point of view of a scientist, do we ascribe the same value to a rock as to a panda? Pick an arbitrary example. And I think most of us would share a system of values in which we would say that life certainly has some special status, it has value, that mind, that thinking, conscious beings have greater value added. But for me, I've always been very struck, and here I'm out of step with many of my scientific colleagues, but struck by the fact that we human beings have come to understand the universe through science and mathematics, and we've made huge strides in unraveling the fundamental structure of matter and the way the universe is put together on a huge scale, and we've made enormous progress in that. And I think it's astonishing that the universe has given rise to a subsystem that can comprehend how the system as a whole works. It's not just a description. It's not that we're now good at describing what's going on in the universe. We can understand it in terms of equations that link everything together at a fundamental level. I think that's the greatest value that we're bringing into this universe. And if we're the only species that really has figured out the cosmic subtext on which the universe runs. We decoded nature at that very deep level. Shows that our minds are an extraordinary feature in nature. And therefore it's all, for me, that because I place such great value in that, all the more reason to look after it. And if possible, if we are alone, to propagate it. If we're not, if the universe is intrinsically biofriendly and gives rise to beings not only can observe, but they too can come to understand, in which case we might be able to communicate with them. That's a part of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. If that's the case, that would be a far more congenial view, a universe not barren, not sterile, but a universe teeming with life and mind and comprehension. And then we could join the cosmic club and become absorbed into that bigger system, and we would cease to use terms like humanity. It's part of something bigger, grander.
Catherine, do you have any response to that, or should we move on to another question?
I'd be glad to respond a little bit, and maybe that'll help us.
Yeah.
I think Paul's sense of value is crucial to bring into the conversation, along with the sense that we don't actually know if there was a beginning or if there will be the end to the universe and or the multiverse. I've been, of course, very influenced by the cosmology of Alfred North Whitehead and the sense of beginningless and endless cosmos or cosmoi. And because of, yes, that bio-friendliness, it seems there's a high likelihood, certainly from a process theological point of view, that there are very interesting other life forms out there. Whether we eventually earn the privilege of encountering them or not is a whole other question. But that there is value that we certainly embody in a distinctive way seems very important to me. I would just like to push for not defining that value strictly in terms of mind, in the sense of intellect or of thought, in a way that could even be reduced to a mathematicized version. And here I'm thinking with the sense of value from that great mathematician Whitehead, who finds that for every actual occasion of becoming, whether it's that of an atom or an electron or of you right now, there is inherent valuing. There is a kind of experience, however unconscious, of value. That value is at the very heart of the universe, not just one heart at the center of it all, but the heart at the center of everything that is that sense of value. And one could, of course, go ahead and get theological and translate that into divine notions of love and all that, but I'm backing away from that for this discussion and saying that value, I think, isn't reducible to consciousness, but I think it's greatly enhanced by consciousness. I would say it's more fundamentally the value of creative interconnectivity or interconnection unfolding in a creative process, the creativity that is the cosmic process, from whatever beginning, right. Yeah, 20, what is it, 13.7 billion years ago or whatever, and on to whatever forms of purpose are achieved. But that creative process of interlinkage is in everything. But the creativity itself drives, it would seem, greater levels of complexity into becoming. That is, there is the evolution of greater complexity of the interconnected creativity. And at a certain point, at least with some species, consciousness becomes part of that valuing, and certainly can enhance it if it's etymologically lived out. Consciousness, knowing with, then consciousness serves the connectivity. But the really, we call it original sin of our species, and it's getting to feel very unoriginal, after all these thousands of years, seems to be our ability to deform and abuse that consciousness so as to manipulate, to exploit, to colonize others of our species and of other species. So if the consciousness tunes itself to the interconnected creativity, then it's bringing great value. And then the culture of that value really does deserve to be saved and communicated. I don't know that we're there yet. I don't know that we are at a point where we should be confident that our culture should in any way go out and shape other life forms. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's possible that we will arrive there at a point where it would make sense that our culture, to use that choice of term from Paul, is worth conveying if we can develop some kind of systemic therapy for this self-destructive and earth-destructive form of consciousness that our civilization has so highly developed. I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful.
Great. So let me ask both of you, and we're going to transition into the Q&A in just a minute. But maybe just each of you give a brief answer on this question of value. You've both spoken eloquently and thoughtfully about value. What value or values can move us to build positive futures with space? Can help us conceive of or imagine a telos, a purpose, a goal. What values do you think hold the greatest hope for you, Paul?
Well, I'd like to quote E.O. Wilson, who said that we have Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions and 21st century technology, and this is a terrible mix. And I would focus on that. We can't do much about our emotions, personalities. We can behave as well as we can. We can do something about our institutions. And one of my mentors in my scientific career was Freeman Dyson. He had a sort of anarchy view of space exploration. He figured that we would colonize planets and build space colonies and all sorts of things. But this would be an opportunity to change those institutions, to get away from what we have at the moment, which are not operating very well at this particular time. And just take something like the United Nations and the crisis that the world is in at the moment. And we think, well, what a pity we don't have something better, other types of institutions that could encourage better behavior. I think if we go to Mars, which would be the first step, another 50 years, build a colony there, we could devise entirely new institutions and create a more hopeful future.
So not necessarily the values, but the transforming our institutions. Catherine, can you briefly comment on the values question? The values that could help us imagine a telos.
Yeah, no, I was trying to circle towards that, thinking about the interconnectivity in our creativity being held in consciousness. But, if we think that the bad values are, there's another form of the 3 C's, competition, capitalism, and colonialism working in their worst forms, those 3 C's might be answered by 3 I's, the imagination, insight, and interrelation. But the imagination, which can be very much stimulated by our space travel, and the insight, which hopefully we bring to every stage of it, are going to backfire unless they are held in this interrelatedness that is the basis for ethics, a mindful interrelatedness, call it responsibility, ability to respond to one another and to our world together, and sometimes back into a spiritual tradition, for me even, a Christian tradition, and go ahead and call it love with the capital L, a pre-human and transhuman and post-human cosmic kind of love that we sometimes avail ourselves of. So with imagination and insight held in interrelation, I think we have some values that can drive us forward purposefully. But I don't think there is some single final purpose, except the purpose of a a thriving together, a flourishing as a species that is supporting and supported by the flourishing of the environment of all the other species. So this multi-life flourishing that we can mindfully enhance, that seems to me to be cosmic purpose, and it requires the creativity and the insight, but I don't think it's an end point. I don't think it's a single omega.
Wonderful.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to take 2 of the questions that we've got in the chat and bring them together to ask each of you. This is very helpful. We've got an attention from Paul to institutions and the reformation thereof, and we've got Catherine's 3 I's. Let's get really concrete with these values and deploy them. 2 questions to test them. The first is one audience member writes, how will the humanity of the third world, so the developing world, perhaps the global south, let's maybe call them non-spacefaring nations, fit into the future of space exploration? And this goes right back to that first question we were asking about who counts as humanity, right, in the first place. So how will the humanity of folks in non-spacefaring nations fit into the future of space exploration? And then another says the Outer Space Treaty states that celestial bodies belong to all mankind. But it looks as though space corporations want to claim outer space resources. What can we do to stop the corporate takeover of our collective resources? The reason I'm bringing these two together is because one of them is asking about the hegemony of a few nation states claiming a space future, and the other is saying, well, even nation states are starting to become taken over by the turn to corporations in outer space. So, Paul, can we throw that one to you first, and then we'll
Yeah, I share these concerns. On the one hand, it's exciting to think that there may be resources in space that could help all of humankind. But of course, how they get exploited, the only model we really have is to enable corporations to make a profit from it. And so we increasingly see outer space as a business opportunity, whether it's space tourism or mining asteroids or bases on the moon, industrial production in orbit. All of these things have some sort of commercial value. But in terms of the non-spacefaring nations, I don't see that as too much of a problem. I think we're all aware of the fact that there are underrepresented nations, and it's easy to do something about that. If we're talking about, really ambitious projects like permanent colonies on Mars and so on, I mean that's a planetary scale effort. No one nation really is going to be able to achieve that. So that's something that humanity as a whole has to agree on and allocate resources to, if we think it's a good idea. There are a lot of people who think, why are we doing that? Why would we expend so many valuable resources setting up bases elsewhere in the solar system? Let's spend that effort trying to look after our own planet a bit better. I've always been positive about the idea of going into space and developing colonies with different institutions where perhaps people could be nice to each other, as they're often not here on Earth. But it would have to be a global effort and include everybody and all cultures and ethnicities.
Yes, it would. And right now that's not possible because of the neo-colonial situation of our planet, right? Because there is such a significant proportion of our planet who still suffers under so-called third world conditions of having been colonized and still in at least economic ways suffering that colonization. So until we actually get hold of a planetary ethos worth taking into the far future, I just don't think we're going to be able to get it together as a world and cooperate on space travel. What we can, of course, the superpowers can, and they can say that they're cooperating. But if in the present world ethos, the space cooperation that we've got goes on, it's just a thin veil for competition and for more forms of outer space capitalism. And of course, Astrotopia tells us all about the whole Bezos-Musk schematism. It's the dangerous religion of the corporate space race is the subtitle. And I think that's what we'll have if we proceed without a quite significant transformation of our civilization through whatever big or small catastrophes we have to go if we are to gain that greater wisdom to be able to live with an imagination and insight integrated ethically across our world, across all of humanity. So right now, space travel is at the expense of both the physical environment and the poor peoples of the world. That does not need to be. If we could get to a point of ethical fitness for true cooperation, then of course the exploration of the cosmos could open us up into forms of creativity and collaboration that we can barely dream of now. Really spacey forms, but forms that would at the same time keep coming back down to earth, being grounded, and yet also being magnificently cosmic. That's possible. Right now, we're not there, but somewhat with Paul. I think there's been beauty and creativity in the space flight so far. There's the possibility that this cosmic perspective will help us to overcome our petty competitiveness, our junkier forms of capitalist greed. It's possible that that cosmic perspective will help the enlargement of our values, but it's just as possible that it'll just intensify our arrogance, our pride, our competitiveness. So I think the transformation cannot wait for something provoked by space travel. If the transformation can gain some momentum now, now, it's possible that then, when we go into space seriously, there could be a really stellar ethical transformation of our species into a now unimaginable kind of cosmic interrelatedness.
So let's dig in. Thank you both so much. Let's dig in a little farther here. There's a question that asks a question from an anti-colonial and indigenous perspective that would regard all space as full rather than empty, or as inhabited rather than uninhabited. So the question is, what gives us the right to move into space? Whose permission should we ask? So I'm thinking about Paul's fantastic intervention that, you know, if we as a species are moving into outer space, the whole species needs somehow to be on board with it. And from numerous different indigenous perspectives, space itself is not uninhabited. The questioner asks a follow-up question and says, who gets to decide on the difference between life and non-life? After all, many indigenous cultures regard mountains, for example, as living. So what do we do with this particular problem of whether or not space is empty and whether or not it's all right for humans, for earthlings to be there? And Paul, can we head to you first, please?
Yes, these subjects come up a lot, and I'm not going to. I don't think mountains are living, but I think life is important, and in connection with going to Mars, for example. So there is NASA has a planetary protection officer, and the whole idea is that we shouldn't contaminate Mars with microorganisms. Unfortunately, it's already happened, so that hasn't worked very well. And the other is we should bring back to Earth any possibly dangerous microorganisms from Mars. Well, we've yet to test that. But there's a lot of talk about terraforming Mars, turning it into something, making it more congenial for human habitation. Have we the right to do that? And I think it's the point of view I would take is that if there is life on Mars, that we have a right to preserve it. In fact, maybe even encourage it. Maybe even transform Mars, just as you might with gardening or something. We might make it more fertile. But if there's no life there, then I think it's okay for us to go there. And of course, we'd be modifying another object in the same way we modified the Earth. The scars of industry have modified the Earth. But some people might think that the pyramids of Egypt, the Great Wall of China, these are human artifacts. They've modified the Earth as well, but maybe not in sort of destructive ways. So it's construction and destruction. I don't have a problem if it's an inert body. Where it gets really difficult, because I happen to just written a paper on this very topic, is whether we should think, if we were convinced that our planet is very unusual, but that most Earth-like planets do not have life on them, whether we should spread life to them. We should dispatch either spacecraft or seed comets passing through the solar system to incubate life and deliver it to these barren planets, so that if you think life has value, we should spread it around. But of course, we have to be very sure that there isn't a life already there, because if there is, and I agree with the questioner, we have a huge ethical responsibility to protect it.
And Catherine.
Yes. So what I'm wondering is even our metaphor of colonizing Mars isn't profoundly problematic. I mean, as we go forth in this exploration of space, and I suspect it's going to go forth unless there's just huge, fast catastrophe of some kind that I don't want to predict. But if we go forth, I wonder if it isn't important as we prepare to do so, to really think through afresh the problem of colonization, right? As such, the problem of the terra nullius doctrine that Christopher Columbus practiced in the New World, this notion of it not being inhabited, and therefore we have the right to claim it. So that's very dangerous, that terra nullius doctrine. But yes, we can make discernments, surely, about what kind of life there is, if there is life. And I don't think that any of us will be able to make a kind of absolute claim that we have no right to travel to other planets if we know that there isn't a life form there that we're disturbing, or if we're in some honest way set up to discern that. And if it's a high priority not to treat any planet as terra nullius, and to be very cautious about what our interference might mean. If we could build a kind of decolonial culture into our imagination of space and into our practice of space travel, then perhaps the more promising options could build up. I mean, maybe we should just consider not talking about colonizing Mars and other planets so casually. Just realize how that metaphor of colonization is so horrifically, genocidally, terracidally freighted. But that's not to prohibit the exploration. That's just to see if we could find some way to install really ethical principles into the exploration. I don't think there is a way without the transformation of our civilization into some sort of age of enlightenment. But that's not impossible.
Let me just ask one brief question, and that is this distinction between colonizing other planets and traveling there seems really, really crucial. Because you, Catherine, you talked about exploration, going other places is okay, colonizing is not. So is it simply a matter of we need to take that word out of our vocabulary when we talk about space exploration, or is there something more deeper that word is pointing towards in our actions, whether we use the word or not?
Well, you know that the answer to your question is yes. Yes,
So is it
something
then
more.
just
The
a
word
matter of,
won't do it. It's if challenges to that word might generate discussion about the ethos involved and the comparisons to what went on 500 years ago, that could be meaningful. You know, just asserting one more level of politically correct language isn't going to be
helpful?
therapeutic.
Paul, any last words about this particular distinction?
Yes. So should we use the C word? I take the rather pragmatic point of view. If there's nobody there, it's okay to set up shop. We could talk instead about permanent human presence or human cities or a human base in the first instance. We don't have to say it's a colony, but I think it would be
Inhabitation.
yeah. I mean, it's going to be what people in the past have called colonies. It's just that if there's nothing in indigenous life, then those ethical issues go away. But I agree that that colonization has bad connotations, and so maybe we need a more uplifting word for human presence out there in space.
Great. Well, we're gonna leave it at that. That's a really good point to end on, and I'm gonna keep coming back to the this question of values and that Paul brought up, and of Catherine's cosmic love. So that's it for our fourth and final session of Sacred Space. I want to thank our distinguished guests, Catherine Keller and Paul Davies, and our sincere thanks to all of you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed these conversations about religion and space exploration. Feel free to write us with your thoughts. And on behalf of MJ and myself, we wish you all peace and wonder. Thank you. So, thank you all. Yes, that was great. So, MJ and I were talking. Let me press stop record.